Magnolia Gardens Nursery has a tissue culture facility that is actually a division of the T&M Corporation, and we were started in 1983. By 1994, we were big enough to build an actual lab facility, and by 2004, we expanded that lab facility, and currently we employ about 40 people in our division. And you can see the shelving units right here. The original lab is 52 by 120 square feet. It has 29 shelves, about 2 million plants total. The expansion, 52 by 75 all growth room, 15 shelves now for 1 million plants, but there's room for 35 more. So all in all, the lab can house about 3 million plants. Right now we're about 1.8 with the slow economy. And there's 15 hoods, room for 2 people each, so that's about 30 technicians. Right now we're about 23 due to the slow economy and working 4 days a week. We grow mainly agapanthus, agave, cordyline, iris, loropetalum, magnolia, nandina, and yucca. But nandina is our biggest seller, over 3 million units sold per year. Currently we have 18 varieties, some you've heard of, some you haven't, and nandina firepower is our biggest seller at 1.4 million per year. Here you can see inside our greenhouse, our finishing area. We have about 3 acres of greenhouse space. Room to wean 360,000 plants at any given time. They stay there about 4 weeks at a time, and then they're relocated to where they're finished off. And we have room to finish 2.5 million liners at a time. All right, so we're going to take a behind the scenes tour. We're going to talk about initiation. That's when we bring the plants from the outside when they're dirty and bring them inside the lab to clean them to a clean, sterile environment. So here we're going to work on colocasia, and you can see those in gallon pots right there. And you can see what we're going to do. We're going to go through the whole process of the stage 1 or initiation of the colocasia. So what she's doing is trimming away the dirt and just getting the plant, and she'll clean off all the bottom there, trim off the tops, and you're just going to get a little piece, which some people call a huli for the colocasia. And she's just going to rinse all that off right there, get them nice and clean, and then we'll begin the sterilization process after they're washed off. And this is just the outside process. So here they are after she's rinsed them and run them through a Clorox cycle for about 15 minutes. And so that you can see they're nice and clean now. And then we're going to go through the trimming of them. So see, she's trimming them now, trimming away all the roots, and just what we're doing is working towards the apical meristem, or the growing point of the colocasia. The colocasia, the growing point is near the base. The shrubs and such that we do, the nandinas, this growing point would be at the tip or the branching. All right, so there it is, the colocasia ready to go to the lab, all cleaned up. And now we're gonna go to the lab. Y'all ready? Okay, so we're walking in. You can see from the door, it's nice and humid outside in Texas. All right, and if you ever wanna come to the lab and you need a password, just all you have to do is flash a bunch of money and tell us you're gonna buy a bunch of nandinas, and we'll let you right on in. All right, so here we are. We're in the lab, and you could see that was some of the technicians earlier. And this is one of the ladies that does all the initiations. And right now, so she's taken that piece that we've cleaned up in the greenhouse, and now she's just gonna trim it back even further into a smaller little piece. And it's just a peeling of layers and cutting it back more. And once she peels it off a little bit more, we're going to sterilize it again in the lab with Clorox, and then we'll do an ethanol solution as well. And you can see how she's got it really much smaller than it was. And you do need to get it smaller, number one, to get it clean, because dirt can hide and pathogens can hide in the little crevices of the plant. And also it needs to be small enough to fit inside the vessel that we're planting it in. So she's just popping it in some sterile water until she's finished with that bunch. And here you are. Here's a finished plant here. This is not actually colocasia, this is an agave, and it is planted in the test tube. And it'll sit there about 6 to 8 weeks before we retransfer it. And in that time, you'll be able to see if there's any contamination. Pretty quickly, actually, within a week, you'll start seeing contamination, especially the fungus contamination in those. All right, so once they're ready, you can see this is a nandina that was ready. It's probably about 10 weeks old right there, ready to be transferred into fresh media. So speaking of media, how do we make that media? Here we make about 36 liters per batch, and we make about 4 to 5 batches per day. And we use a mixer to keep everything suspended. We don't actually melt all the solids like the agar and the sugar. We keep it all suspended and then we dispense it with an automatic dispenser. Here are all our stock solutions. We make our stock solutions about 5 gallons at a time, and you can see them there. All right, and so she's dispensing the media with the automatic dispenser, and this allows us to dispense the exact amount into each vessel at a time. And the mixer again is keeping everything suspended, about 36 milliliters per jar here. And then once it's all dispensed and she's got them all covered, they'll go into the autoclave and they'll be sterilized at high temperature and high pressure. So around 250 degrees Fahrenheit and 15 pounds of pressure is what the autoclave is at. All right, and then now once she takes them out, the magical thing is that they're sterile, but also what has happened is those solids have melted. Kind of like if you make Jell-O, you want to melt the gelling agent and the sugar, usually with boiling water. Well, the autoclave does that for us. And so they're all sterile. And then we will put them into the cooling room to cool off and set before we move them into the room where the technicians can get their media for the day. And everything is labeled with a label, but also you can see that media was pink. That's just another labeling method. It's just food coloring. All right, so the next step of the process is screening, getting the plants ready for the technicians to work. We don't want, you know, up to 30 technicians coming in and getting their own plants. We have 2 supervisors that screen through the plants, making sure that the plants are clean of contaminants and that they are looking uniform and not deformed. So that was their job, and then they'll take them to the technicians. And then once the technicians cut them and process them, then they'll pick them back up and put them back into the growth room. So we have minimal traffic in the growth room. And we screen for different contaminants, the obvious ones of course, but sometimes there are contaminants that you can't really see with the naked eye, and that's why she's using the light to see if she can see any small amounts of bacteria or anything in the jars. All right, so speaking of technicians, here's their workspace here. And you can see they have a bead sterilizer, and that we found this is the safest means of sterilizing the tools at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can fit 2 people in a spot. And they have a red line there. That's where they need to keep their plants behind, because if they bring them too close to their body, that's when the air circulation from the HEPA filter doesn't really, it's not really effective when it's closer to their body. All right, so so they'll do the multiplication and the rooting depending on what the schedule is. And today I think we'll be looking at some multiplication or stage 2 of agapanthus. And everything is cut on sterile paper towels, which we sterilize in the autoclave as well. And the supervisor there is also, they check to make sure that the technicians are cutting everything properly, as some plants have different techniques, or we're looking at our schedule and we want to process things differently depending on the orders or the season. All right, and so with multiplication, basically you're just going to be cutting the clumps into smaller clumps and replanting them, just refreshing the cultures. And for the most part, what we hope to get is, say we open 1 jar, we hope to get 2 from the 1. And one thing that we do is we try not to mix the jar. So if we don't get an exact count, say we don't put exactly 10 clumps per jar, what we do is we take the 1 and we get 2 from it. Because once you start getting exact counts, you start mixing from other jars, and that's when you can get a large contamination outbreak when everything's all mixed together.